Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Latino Free Minds. I am your host, Gio, and with me today is my host, Vincent, my co host, Vincent. Um, I'm excited today because we are coming to you for the first episode, the first live episode of Vincent.
Rebellion to tyrants. And then we can finish the rest of it. It's obedience to God. That's an old Thomas Jefferson. They wanted that to be the motto of the United States. Thomas
Yeah, dude,
Jefferson and
and Ben
Benjamin
Franklin.
Franklin.
It's so sick, man.
Gangster.
I,
Yeah.
you know, we, I have some stuff that I'm working on, and I had sent it to you, and you were like, "Dude, that should be the name of the show." I loved it, dude. I loved it so much. Um, and for everybody that's tuning in, they're probably wondering where Christian's at. Christian is still on Tuesdays for prime time. He will be going live with Daniel going forward. Um, This is the new show. This is the new Latino Free Minds every Monday night at 9 o'clock. After you put your kids to bed, tuck them in, give them a good kiss. We will be right here on all of your favorite platforms from Instagram, Facebook, X. If you want to watch us on Twitch, wherever you want to watch, we are live every week. Vincent, for those that don't know you, I'd like you to introduce yourself as a member of Latino Free Mind.
Yeah. So I ended up here kind of by accident. I met Gio and Daniel and all those guys through a few people at some of the state convention we went to, right? And and we just got along really well. We had very similar ideas. It's fun to throw some ideas, and they're really active on social media, which I really admire. It's a real full-time job you guys are doing on social media, hoping you get some more traction here. And so I thought I'd jump in, and I'm really a policy junkie. I really like to read bills and things like that, propositions. By trade, I'm a history professor, so I teach this. I teach the California Constitution. Part of the college course, if you take a history of California course, it counts as a political science course as well. It's a US 3 requirement, is what it's called. And so in that course, I started teaching it 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, the first thing, my mentor told me was, you have to cover the California Constitution. You have to cover the structure of government. You have to cover all the politics of California, too. It's not just a history course. And that's why, for me, it's been one of my most popular and successful courses because, it covers so many different areas. It used to cover some other areas as well, but things have changed and whatnot, but it's still essentially a hybrid of a history and a political science course. So I do this for a living. I look at the different bills and the Constitution and the different laws coming out, and in my classroom we analyze them all the time. We have debates, and what would you do if you were in the Assembly or the state Senate, or if you were on the Democrat side or the Republican side. So we try and get a well-rounded kind of holistic view of California and California politics. And then we trace the origins. If you've seen some of the videos I've done, we trace the origins of a lot of the current events. So it was kind of a natural fit to join Latino Free Minds and kind of just do what I'm already doing and just record it. I
Yeah.
have lots and lots of material. I have pages, thousands of pages of notes that I've accumulated over 10 years, because you're always looking for a new lecture, right? You don't want to be that boring professor who just comes and does the same thing over and over. I always try and do something new every semester. So sometimes we'll dig into the original Constitution. Sometimes we'll dig into the Constitution of the late 1870s and talk about, the racial tensions and the ethnic tension. Not even racial. I mean, you have the Irish uh, fighting amongst, the Chinese as well. Um, but it sparks an entirely new constitution. So all of these different events really, now I'm just taking it to social media. So I'm hoping to have I'm just happy to to do it and have fun with it because I've been doing it for 10 years. I absolutely love my job. I did run for state assembly unsuccessfully. But that was also interesting and educational as well, learning how things work from a candidate's perspective. I had never really
Yeah.
had that perspective. So, for me, it's not really about red or blue or Democrats or Republicans or liberal, conservative, because I have friends who are from all walks of life. My whole thing is policy. And, when I ran for the assembly, I didn't run against anybody. Everyone's like, you're running against this person or that person. I don't see it that way. I run against policy.
Yeah.
There's nothing personal about politics for me anyway, outside of, how it affects my life and the lives of my family. But that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I gotta say, Vincent, because, um, I met you at the, California GOP convention last year, and for those of you who haven't met Vincent, he's a short guy. I'm about 5'4", and he's about 5'1", maybe, on a good day. Um, so, um, you know, what impressed me about your run, I coming in it hindsight, obviously. I don't live in the area where you ran, but what impressed me most about it, looking back at it, is that you went into it as somebody that was politically unknown. You are a professor, um, and you came out and you started your political ambitions, and you you didn't like putter out, man. You hit some good numbers, considering you were virtually unknown weeks before the election. Um, for those that don't know, um, what was the percentage that you walked out with, on that election?
I think of the initial drop, I almost got 10%. And then on the total, I think I was around 8.5%. But I had worked in the LA GOP. I had done some stuff in Pennsylvania as a youngster. But they kind of keep you on the periphery, and that was something that
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to dig in more after the election and start to look at it in a different way and say, how do we get younger people involved? Because they all want to be involved. There's
Mhm.
just no real pathway. And a lot of the times when they want young people to be involved, they want them to just kind of be like furniture, standing in the background, taking pictures or
Oh,
handing
tell me
stuff
about it.
out instead of actively like being involved, like, hey, do this, run that, because prior to being a professor, I was a small business owner. We did craft services, we did catering and things like that. And anytime I got a new person, it's like, just here's how you learn this. I'm going to teach you, and then you're going to just do the task, and we'll see if you work out, and then we'll find something that fits your strengths. So that's not happening in politics, at least not on the Republican side of the aisle. I can't speak entirely for the Democratic side of the aisle, but I think a lot of the similar problems that the right faces, the left faces as well. And I don't even like the terms left or right, because to me, the true structure of Republican government is, you know, we only share a few, there's multiple pillars within Republicanism, right? I mean, if you look at California, it's pro life for some people, but then it's, lower taxes or, less government regulation or whatever those pillars are. My pitch is always, we don't have to agree on every single pillar of the Republican Party. We just need to have enough in common to where we go and vote for those
Yeah.
specific things. And I think that's where the pathway to victory for the Republicans is. But I think there's been this real federalization of localized politics. So, was something that kind of shocked me when I first ran. People were asking me questions about Trump, and I said, no, this is for the state assembly. This is not, this is for the state. We are our own, essentially, we are our own country, right? We're our own republic. And what I found was like people just don't know about any of these things. They're like, is that city council? Do you stay here in Riverside County? I'm like, do you go to Washington D.C.? I'm like, no, that's Ken Calvert. He's
Yeah.
been in that seat and he's a congressman. And so what I really started to realize is how uneducated the general public is to what these positions do, their function. And to me, it was kind of an eye opener, primarily because I teach this every semester. So to me, it's like, okay, this is how it works. This is the structure. This is how bills get passed and propositions. And this is where the propositions come out of the Constitution and how it's legal. And then when you talk to the general public, it's like, are you a MAGA supporter? It's like, what does that have to do with the state election? I feel like we're getting a little distracted.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that was a big eye opener. And, I think the California Republican Party, and this is just my opinion, it can go in a different way. And if it goes down that way, they'll have a fighting chance. But until then, until you disconnect yourself from the federalization of localized politics, you're going to deal with any little hiccup or any anti-Trump sentiments or anti whoever it is, if it's Rubio or DeSantis or anything federal, and that puts us at a very very big disadvantage.
I think that's exactly something that I've been talking about for a long time, Vincent, is, um, when it comes to California politics, specifically on the Republican side, we get so tied down to the national party, and we forget that in California, that doesn't work. You know, it the when you look at California elections, we've been losing 60-40 because we've been tied to the national Republican Party, and it's what bothers me about that is we don't, as a political party, we don't look at it and say, "Hey, California is not voting Democrat, they're just voting against the Republican policies." And it's not that they're voting against our policies, they're voting against the national policies. And what bugs me is because we have boondoggled ourselves to the national party, we don't, when we go to them for help, they don't send us money. That in fact, we're sending them money to run their elections. We're here. I mean, I go out and talk to these Republican candidates, and I say, "Hey, well, what kind of help are you getting from so and so?" And they're like, "Nothing. I'm doing this all on my own. I'm taking all my own money out." And I just think, like, dude, the Democrats, y- y- you know, there's an office that a candidate is running for right now, and his opponent has got like $200,000 just ready to just whatever they need to do. And you ask him, what do you have? I have $6,000 of my own money. I'm reaching out to donors and this and that. I'm like, dude, s- $6,000 to $200,000 is nothing. This isn't gonna be hard. $6,000, Vincent, you can spend $6,000 in flyers and, um, maybe food for your volunteers for the next couple weekends.
No, it's not much, and that's the big problem. Is you're already stacked up against it because you're in a deep blue state, but then on top of it, you have no financial support at all. And then not even at that point, like beyond just that point, you're looking at the lack of infrastructure. People like were very excited. I like to use an example of Spencer Pratt. Like people were very, very excited, and I thought, he was a fun candidate and all that stuff. And you could think whatever you want about him, but I thought he was, interesting and had some great ideas. And he's a media guy and he's pretty good at it. He's likable, I think. And I my biggest fear was exactly what happened. He didn't have the infrastructure. When you got like billionaires like Tom Steyer sending out thousands of people to go and harvest ballots, it doesn't matter how big of a celebrity you are unless you're Arnold. And even Arnold, Arnold only won, I think, like 14% of the total vote on the recall. So it's even took that for him to get in. And that's Arnold freaking Schwarzenegger, like
Yeah,
there, he's Arnold, he's an
yeah.
icon. And,
But
Spencer
don't
Pratt's not that.
don't forget Arnold Schwarzenegger ran in a different era. Dude, since 2012, we've been in the jungle primary. I feel like since 2012, you hear all of these stories of people that volunteer, at least on the Republican side. I don't want to get too much into the Democrat side, and I one of the things that I do wanna do, Vincent, this year, I wanna go to the Democrat convention. I wanna see how they do
Yeah,
things. I wanna see if they can win me back. You know what I mean, out there? No, but seriously, on the Republican side, um, since the jungle primary, all of the volunteers tell me the grassroots candidates always the leading grassroots candidates always lose. It's always they call them uh, the establishment candidate always gets through. Um, and unfortunately, when it's an establishment candidate, when it's not the what the people out in the world want, you just don't get a lot of excitement. And I don't think that that's enough to get into that 20-point deficit, or we lose by 20 points. Um, I don't think it's enough to gain 11 points, because that really, you and I were talking, right? It's not about winning 20 points of the difference. It's you just
right,
have to win half plus one vote. So you need 10 points plus one vote. It's just it's not enough if you continue to go with the establishment. But even if you go with the grassroots candidate, I don't know that it's enough. You need something different. So it is something that I hope the Republican Party does. And interestingly enough, this election in October, excuse me, in November, we have obviously Steve Hilton, we have Michael Gates, um, Sonia Shaw. There's a whole ballot of solid Republicans, but more importantly, um, we have a bunch of propositions that we have to worry about. And I feel, Vincent, that the propositions are the things that people least prepared for. They walk in, and it's one of those things where you go, well, this is where our money's gonna be spent. What does it say? And that's where a lot of the Republicans come out and say, hey, they're trying to trick you. You walk in there and you think it's one thing, but it's actually another. And you voted for it in the way you read it, and the way that it reads is not accurate. So, what we want to
right.
do over the
Yeah, and
next.
then
Yeah, go ahead.
that's what you're getting in this. You're getting this in a Democratic supermajority, right? Like so, like I know it's the big sexy thing to go and take the governor's seat, or win a lieutenant, Gloria Romero take a lieutenant governor seat. Wow, that would be a great story. But the fact of the matter is that the supermajority needs to be broken down first, because politics in California is not competitive. There is no
Right.
negotiating. There doesn't need to be any negotiating. And so if you don't break that whole stranglehold first, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the governor is. It doesn't matter who. I mean, just Sonia Shaw, for example. She wins the primary, but the fact of the matter is they are able to strip the powers of the superintendent and basically put it into an appointed bureaucratic figure. Now, for better or worse, I know some people voted for it and against it. Some Republicans voted for it, and a lot of people were upset. But that's neither here nor there. That just tells you where the problem is. And the problem is there is a supermajority, and they could basically decide to rewrite the entire Constitution if they so choose. And that's the big problem we have. And so if you're not getting that infrastructure support, I know Carl DeMaio's tried with Reform California and things like that. But also, too, like you need to look at the demographics of California. That's something that has been big since the 1960s. Even I mean, if you look at the politics of the 1920s and 1930s, they catered to the broad demographic of California, and I'm just not seeing that here in California, from the assembly races all the way up to the executive positions. So, what I would like to see is more of an embracing of regionalized politics, where candidates can kind of, you know, go their own way, so to speak, without being attacked by the CRA or any of the other various groups, the Lincoln Clubs, or all these different subgroups of the Republican Party, and just kind of let them run their game. I think that would be very helpful. It would help some candidates in places like Los Angeles, where I'm not saying they have to be liberals or whatever terms you want to use that they generally use, but like there has to be some type of appeal. and so if you're not even trying to appeal to these groups, and then you wonder why you're getting mud stomped every single round,
Yeah.
it's just completely demoralizing, right? And then we have people who are in safe red seats, or red sinks as they call them, and those people are not vocal, so it makes it equally as difficult. They don't want somebody who can speak. The Democrats don't want somebody who can go up there and rip off a speech like a Carl DeMaio or a David Serpa, or somebody who is gifted, uh, a gifted orator, because now they're going to have to deal with that. For example, Nick Shirley is a perfect example of that. They don't want a guy who's out there vocal, has a following, and can get steam. The same with Bill Asaley, right? He was a skilled orator,
Yeah.
and he never passed a bill. Nothing ever even made it out of committee. I think he proposed something like, I want to say, like 350 different bills, and none of them even made it to the legislative floor. But he was highly effective because he was a great orator, and he brought attention to things in a way that a lot of our legislators don't do, who are in these red safe seats. And so I think there's a multiple, scaffolding of problems that we have to take care of. But again, going back to the baseline, you need to win the assembly and the Senate, not take it over, just make it so it's not a supermajority, so it brings them to the negotiating table, and then you can start to put people's feet to the fire.
No, I agree. I think the Republican Party needs to step it up. One of the producers here put in a comment, um, the GOP will warn you 2 days before the actual vote when it's too late. It's one of the things that we've complained about for a long time at Latino Free Minds is we feel like we see candidates that are real fighters. We have like Proposition 50, a proposition special election that requires high attention before Californians, not just Republicans, but Californians in general, unless you're a Democrat, you're going to lose your voice in your district because they're going to they're going to gerrymander as the right word to put on it, and they're going to redistrict our congressional seats. That's essentially taking our voice away as voters. And my thing is, I've said on prime time many times, when I come out here and I talk all the things that I talk about, it's not because I want to be the Republican face. I don't want people to think like, oh, Gio, he's out there really fighting for us. I'm not fighting for the Republican Party. I'm fighting for my family. I'm fighting mainly to bring balance back so that my family can benefit from that balance. Otherwise, we have bills that just don't benefit my family. If my daughter's younger, but if she was in high school, went out with her boyfriend, got pregnant, and wanted to go have an abortion, how does that benefit me? But for some reason, Scott Wiener thinks that it does. Scott Wiener, who has no kids, Scott Wiener thinks it's okay for the school to say, "Hey, your teenage daughter is at this point in her life where she wants to have sex. Well, why stop her from doing that? She should be able to have sex, and if she gets pregnant, then she should be able to go to the school and request that they help her get an abortion, and the school should be able to set that up during school time. She should be able to go have an abortion on the state's dollar." And the parents never find out about it. The daughter goes home. It's one of the things that I talk about is if the daughter goes home, then what? She gets home, she's sad for weeks, for months, for years, possibly because she's dealing with trauma that the state has allowed her to do, but you as a parent have no idea. Now, did you vote for this? Not really. Just district up in the San Francisco Bay Area, decide they decided to vote for Scott Wiener, who put together this bill, and the assembly voted for it. Now, why is that a problem that the assembly voted for it? The issue up there is that there's no balance. The Republicans can't step up and say, "Hey, wait a minute, this is a problem. Maybe that's okay with all of the and nothing against gays. Maybe this is okay for all the gays out in San Francisco and in that district, but down in Riverside, down in Fresno County, our constituents are not okay with that. Our constituents have kids. Our constituents have teenagers. They don't want their teenagers going and having abortions behind their backs. They don't want their teenagers going out and getting sex hormone drugs so that their kids can go on to this transgender pathway, and behind their back. That's not okay. But we don't have that balance in California. See, that this is
No,
this
not
is
at
the thing
all.
I keep telling you guys. It's I don't want to force you into this MAGA world. No, I just want balance. I just want there to be enough people up in Sacramento to say, hey, no, this is not okay. We're not going to vote. And hey, maybe a lot of bills are going to be at a standstill. But I think that's what we need in California. We don't just need all of these uh, weird bills getting passed through, like the Nick Shirley bill.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another misconception among my students when I ask the question, is government supposed to move fast or slow? The way it's designed is to move slowly, to ensure that kind of the culture can figure out first, like, is this okay with even the minority populations, because the Republican system is set up to ensure that the minority population has an equal voice, not necessarily the majority. Because what we essentially have here in California, because of a supermajority, is we have democracy. And democracy, as the old Benjamin Franklin quote goes, is two wolves and a sheep deciding what is for dinner. And that's essentially what we have in the legislator. They're just deciding what's good for them in their districts. But Riverside County is a much different place than San Francisco, and San Francisco has its beautiful elements, and so does Riverside County. And the great part is we get to decide where we want to live in this state. But we should have equal representation within our government, and we don't. And that's because the government can move fast because they have a supermajority, but also too, we need to really start to look at, okay, how do we use the mechanisms of government to fix some of this stuff? And that is the propositions, right? But
Yeah,
the disorganization of the GOP, just generally from what I've seen, maybe I'm incorrect, but it appears that they need a makeover of sorts, because they aren't a big they're not as big a tent to party as they should be,
right.
because listen, and this is an argument I made in a PhD course with everybody who was a progressive Democrat, and so I made this argument that you know the Democrat policy is based on intersectional coalitions, whereas republicanism is really based on pillars. So the acceptance of a few pillars out of multiple pillars will basically make you like a 2 to 3 issue voter. And if you can really convince people on those 2 to 3 issues, then you got a voter. Whereas if you are on the Democratic side of the aisle, you are more likely to be part of one of these intersectional coalitions, and it's a kind of a winner take all system where you have to kind of accept the party whole cloth. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a break in that with the DSA people and the progressives on the left side of the aisle, but they're dealing with kind of the same thing. The establishment has the mechanisms to hold these people out. They on their side are essentially grassroots, and what also hurts them is the jungle primary. I talked with Cody Pedersen, who is in San Diego, and he's a progressive Democrat, and I like to get these perspectives. And one of his main points was that the jungle primary system hurts progressive Democrats as much as it hurts grassroots Republican candidates, because you can't get out of the primary. The establishment wins. But if it
Right.
were grassroots Republicans versus establishment Republicans for Republicans to vote on, now the grassroots guy has a chance. And same with the progressive Democrat on the left side. And what you end up with is more of a balancing act, and I think that
Yeah.
would be very good for the state.
No, I agree. There's one thing that I wish we would get rid of is the jungle primary. There's no reason why it should ever have been brought in. It takes away all the excitement of being able to bring in a candidate that isn't establishment. With the election we just saw, there were, I think, at least two races where we had a an establishment candidate go up against a grassroots candidate. And at least in one instance, in the governor race, I felt, at least up until January, where it became personal for me, we had two great candidates. Um, I like Chad Bianco better, but that's not to say that I looked at Steve Hilton and thought he's a terrible candidate. I thought Steve is a good candidate too. Um, but as things progressed, I saw a lot of momentum behind Chad Bianco up until the endorsement from Donald Trump. And unfortunately, with that endorsement from Trump, um, it ended up knocking Chad Bianco down a couple points. And with Steve Hilton running out and saying, "Hey, Chad Bianco needs to drop out. Chad Bianco needs to drop out," it started to go in the opposite direction. And all that started with an outside endorsement. And when I would talk to people, they would go, "Yeah, I really like Chad. Chad is the guy, but I don't want the off chance that if I vote for Chad, I'm gonna make sure that it's gonna be a for sure 2 Democrats going through." And I'm like, "Dude, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. First of all, there's no excitement from the Democrats." Um, at that time, Swalwell was just getting, the tape released on Swalwell. And I
I
said
think we
that
were at the I think we were at the convention
yeah,
with Bianco out in the grassy area when we found out about the Swalwell thing. I think Hilton was out there too. Hilton and Bianco were both out there, and that news kind of dropped in the late afternoon. I remember. Uh,
yeah,
uh, really, yeah, and we talked about this, right, Gio? Like the excitement. Becerra was like at the bottom of the pools, and me and
he had
you were like,
he's at
"How?"
3%. He was at
Yeah,
3%. Yeah, we did talk about that. I
yeah,
I was thinking, you know what I thought, Vincent, and we talked about this. I thought that Antonio Villaraigosa was the better candidate. He was the better candidate in 2018 when they ran. Becerra is he's just not good in a debate, especially when you have a better Democrat out there. And Villaraigosa was the better Democrat. I know I'm getting a lot of Republicans right now that are like, wait a minute, doesn't he have ties to Fidel Castro and Cuba? Well, we didn't know that until recently, right? Up until recently, I was still trying to reach out to Antonio to bring him on the show and try to talk to him because he's got an incredible history and how he's progressed with the Democrat Party. And even he
yeah.
has called out the Democrats have gone way off track. We need to bring it back, and I want to be the one to bring it back. Meanwhile, um, uh, Becerra is not about that. He's kinda just like, "No, I think Gavin's doing a good job. I think we're doing a great job in California." When Democrats that are actually involved, because there are some that don't even pay attention to politics, they just vote blue no matter who, but those that are actually involved will say, things have gotten a little bit crazy." Especially when you bring up things like, Scott Wiener and, some of these weird bills I had mentioned earlier, things that we talked about in the past that target kids, target parental rights. When you bring those things up, they go, "Yeah, we've gone off the rails there." And if you ask Becerra, he's just like, "Yeah, no, we're doing great." It's almost like when the leader of a country things are going really bad, and they're just like, "No, we're doing good." It's just because perception is everything. And I feel like that's how Becerra's handled it, whereas Villaraigosa was honest. He also had experience being the mayor of Los Angeles, but he was gone for a little bit, and,
Yeah, I think that 8 years really killed him of
it did.
Gavin Newsom getting in. That really hurt him because that kind of aged him out, and he didn't really connect federally in the political system in the DNC. So he was kind of left between a rock and a hard place. Like he had already served in the assembly in the '90s. Like he was a pretty formidable politician. And that's another thing too. Like Becerra, like as much as people talk bad about Becerra, like at the end of the day, he is a very highly skilled politician, and he
Oh
was
my
patient
god.
enough to wait it out. he has, I mean, I'll just say this, he has beautiful artwork. I mean, that means something, you know, like
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of things we can learn from, you know, analyzing a political career like that of Javier Becerra, because he seems to just be able to tap into things and get really none of the heat that is, or suffer any of the consequences of his policy. And that's the, to me, the hallmark of a of an excellent politician we can learn
yeah.
from.
Yeah, not to put away or put aside all of the things that are coming out. They're not really coming out. I mean, these are things that the things that you are now seeing, that you're paying attention to with the migrant children and the failures at HHS with COVID. These are all things that Latino Free Minds we talked about well before the election. Only reason we stopped talking about Becerra was because his numbers were like 5%, 3%, 1%, and then the Swalwell tape leaked, and he went back up to 3%, 5%, 7%, and we were like, "There's no way he's gonna come up from there. He's gonna
Well,
stay down in the bottom."
I think the Democrats realized, hey, you know, we got to pick our poison here. We can get the establishment guy that is very, you know, he's very open to our ideas, or we can get this Steyer guy who is going to do what he wants to do and usher in this entirely new progressive era that kind of smokes out the establishment. So, and I think they knew that. I mean, the Democrats are very good at this. They understand identity politics in a way that the right doesn't. And so, even some of these issues that you are talking about when it comes to Javier Becerra, a lot of them are very salacious issues for the people on the right. But people on the left look at it as, you know, oh, that's kind of just a byproduct of helping people get here. You know, like the kids and the trafficking and the and all of that. They, you know, a lot of them turn the blind eye to that. And the people who do vote, a lot of these people in these cities, they live in bubbles. I mean, they live, if you're in Los Angeles, a lot of these deep blue areas, when I was part of the LAGOP, like these are the most beautiful, absolutely safe, you know, just with the best restaurants and the best coffee shops and the best, everything is wonderful, you know. And I've lived in Sherman Oaks. I mean, and you know, I used to take my son to, you know, go have lunch at Marmalade and Calabasas, and you know, like it's beautiful, man. And there's
Yeah.
no
Oh, I
complaints to
know.
be had, and that's why it's hard to get people riled up in some of the Malibu. You know, you go and have fish tacos, and you go enjoy the cool air and the it's
Oh
just
my
beautiful.
god, Vincent. Oh, you're reminding
Ah,
me. I mean, like, I used to live down there in the valley too, and, going to paninis or, just waking up on Saturday morning and going and having, what's the name of the bakery, the Cuban bakery?
Portos. I know the owners.
Gordo's. Oh my god, just to be able
Oh,
to do those things. You can't do that in
ah,
Fresno. Not to say that Fresno has some great spots. Oaxaca Bakery in
right,
Clovis is phenomenal. Best bakery in all of California, I'll tell you that right now. But, Los Angeles, you just have access to everything that you want. You
right,
you think of whatever food, and they have top tier, might not be the best in the state, but it's gonna be way up there. You won't notice the difference, and it's all, like, just a couple miles from you.
right.
2,
Yeah.
3-hour drive, but it's a couple miles from you. If you leave at 8 AM in the morning, there's no traffic yet. Um, it really is great. It's a great place to live if you can ignore some of the things like the homeless.
Well,
The
if you
homeless
have
aren't
money, you drive through
I
Bel
look.
Air. No homeless in Bel Air. You go down the Chandler Estates where I used to live. There are no homeless in the Chandler Estates. Yeah, sure, there may be one on the next couple streets over in Van Nuys, but like for the most part, you're pretty insulated. And yeah,
Yeah.
things are expensive, but you don't live there unless you got money. So
Well, I
you
lived in
know,
Tarzana, and, it's close enough to Reseda and, Van Nuys. It's, 3, 4 streets over, and it's you run into a homeless
sure,
person. Um but it's still far enough from downtown where you don't it's not like you're on Skid Row. It
Right.
is great. Um, and it's all perception, because if you live in a place like Fresno, or if you live in a place like El Dorado Hills, Woodland, California, those towns, those cities, they don't have the huge homeless population like Los Angeles does. When you are in Los Angeles and you might see one guy pushing a cart in, you know, a few block radius, you don't see that as a problem. You just see him as he's passing through. Um, Whereas if you see it out here, I mean, dude, I'm not gonna lie to you. There was one time I was driving, um, probably like 3 blocks away from my house here in Fresno, and there was a homeless guy, and I slowed down. I was like, "Hey, can I help you?" Like, he's like, "What do you mean? Can you help me?" I was like, "Yeah, man, you don't belong here. Like, what are you doing out here? Downtown is like 10 miles away from here. How did you even get here? The bus doesn't run through here." And he thought I was attacking him, but really I'm just like, dude, like, what are you doing out here? There's nothing out here but fields and housing. There's not a grocery store. You can't dig to the dumpster. Like, I don't know what you do as a homeless person, but this just isn't the right environment for you. I don't want you to die out here. Like,
Yeah.
are you okay? Um, so,
Yeah, so I think
it's
it's compartmentalized for people, like you're saying. So out of sight, out of mind for most people, that's kind of their problem over in Venice. Like I'd hear people in Playa del Rey and be like, "Oh, but that's Venice. That's just how it's always been." It's like, well, man, that's like 2 miles over, man. Let's go eat some In and Out over there. Like, but they live like
I gotta say Del
Playa
Rey is
del Rey is
nice.
an yeah, I mean, I worked in Playa del Rey for many years, and it was like, you guys just don't get it. Like, you don't get it. Like, it's you guys live in the most
It is a
beautiful
different
place
world.
on earth. Yeah,
It is a different world. Like when we would go out all the time when we lived in LA. Went to Venice Beach once because it's Venice Beach, and I was like, yeah, we're never coming back here. This is not what I thought it was gonna be, because you hear about it. You're like, man, Venice Beach is the place to be, Santa Monica,
yeah.
and then you
Yeah,
go and
you
you're
see
like,
the old
nah.
you see Pumping Iron, you see Arnold and Franco Colombo lifting weights, and it's like, it's you're like, dang, dude, that's where I want to be. Yeah, the first time I ever went to Venice Beach, I remember my brother had just got his driver's license, and he's like, let's go to Muscle Beach. We were into lifting and whatnot. And we show up, and it's like, yeah, there are some people lifting, but there are a lot more homeless people. And I just remember the entire like there's like this entire grassy knoll just filled with homeless people.
Oh
And
my
I
god,
thought,
yeah,
wow, how is that possible?
and that's not
It's not.
humane. It's not
No,
humane. It's not
no.
right. The Democrats, they just seem to be okay with that, and they think, let's just build them homes for $1 million a person, $1 million a person, Vinny. I mean, when I lived in Los Angeles, a home, this was 2015, 2016. You can get a home down in that area for like 700,000, and they're building $1 million shacks. It's just insane to me. It's just the waste.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all over the place, and it's what it does too is it dilutes a lot of the business environment so bad. I mean, we used to go to Ventura Boulevard a couple nights a week to go eat dinner. And, my wife and I go back sometimes, go visit some friends. We were just in the valley about a month or so ago, went to Casa Vega, that's my spot. But, you're like, you have memories down there and you're like, oh, that's where we bought this for, my son or whatever. And it's out of business, all these little spots are out of business and they're tagged up and there's weeds everywhere and there's cracks in the road and it's just it's unfortunate because you know what it used to look like, right? And
Oh,
and same with Venice
absolutely.
Beach. Yeah, people
Those
know what it used
everything
to look
has
like.
everything had a history there. Like
Yeah,
Ventura Boulevard, like you mentioned. You used to be able to go to a
yeah,
restaurant on Ventura Boulevard. I love teppanyaki. I can't remember the name of the teppanyaki place in Encino that I used to like going to, but you go in there and there's just pictures of movie stars,
Oh yeah.
athletes that have gone to eat there, and there's some like, there's, like, a wall of certain, actors that would routinely go there, and you could see them aging through the years, and it's like, now they're gone.
Yeah,
COVID
and I mean,
came and
I
just wiped it out or whatever reason,
yeah,
those restaurants are
Jerry's
gone.
Deli. Jerry's
Oh,
Deli. I mean, my wife and I used to go there. We they knew us so well. That's when I gained all my weight because everybody they knew us so well. We had our own booth at Jerry's Deli, and you'd go in there and there'd be, oh, there's a Kardashian, or oh, there's Joey Diaz being annoying and loud. At the
yeah.
midnight, my wife and I would go and get some steak fries and hang out, and it's like, those places are gone, or a lot of the Mel's Diners of the world and places like that. I know some of them still exist, but they're not the same as they used to be. And I remember getting off of work really late. My buddy David and we would just go to all these places, Pacific Dining Car and all these wonderful, awesome places that had a long history and people who had worked there for 30, 40 years, and COVID just wiped all of them out. And then the bad policy kept them out. It's like there's no resurgence happening in a lot of these places, primarily
Yeah.
because the policies are so bad, and they are, detrimental not only to business. I mean, just the minimum wage. If you're running a small business and you're operating in Los Angeles, you're talking $17 an hour. Think
Mhm.
about, like, one of my favorite places was a place called the Vegan Joint, and it was cheap, it was delicious. I don't know, it was something different, and I can't imagine a place like that, like outside of like the family working there, being able to hire an employee at $17 an hour. It's just not
Oh, that
logical.
those days are gone, brother. Those days are gone. And it's not getting better, Vinny. It's not getting better. Let's think about our ballots here, right? We're about
Yeah.
to vote. It is a very important year to vote because every election that we go down with this super majority Democrat legislature in California, we continue to go further down the path of not being able to come back. Proposition one, propositions now. It's the financial and taxpayer summary. Now, Vinny, you have the summary of the bill. Um, I'm not sure if you had a chance to review it. If you wanted to explain
Oh yeah.
the
I That's after I reviewed it and asked questions and dove into it, and I call it the Porky Pig bill, because that's what it seems to be. It's just pork. If you really look at it, the disbursement of money is going. It's to feed the NGO machine. It's to feed. They're building housing. It's like, wait, what? Developers. You got the Cal States, the UCs getting money, the veterans getting money, and yeah, it doesn't increase taxes. But what it does do is it takes from the general fund, which, surprise, comes from taxes. So they'll and it puts us on the block for 25 years. It's $500 million a year for 25 years. We're going to end up paying, I don't know, something like a ridiculous $1 billion in
el-
in
11,
fees and everything else.
11.25 billion dollar total. So
Yeah.
it's the veterans and
Well, the
don't get
veteran
sold
part
here.
actually, well, the veteran part is actually paid for, I think, federally. So there's something that kind of excludes that from the general fund, but the other 10 billion is still going to be paid back over the course of 25 years. I mean,
Yeah,
Gio,
the the
we'll be
affordable
ready to run
housing
for office.
The affordable housing general obligation bond, $11.25 billion in total. That's $10 billion in housing programs and 1.25 billion in veteran home loans. Yeah, I feel Vincent, everybody keeps saying this. And the first time I saw this, I thought the exact same thing is they throw that veterans part in there so we can go, man, I love our veterans. They deserve to have their homes.
Right.
Of course I'm gonna vote yes for the veterans. But it's the 90 over 90% of that money is going to what? So,
Well, I have the
10,000,000,000.
breakdown here. So you got
You go to go
7.2
through it.
7.2 billion going to multifamily rental housing because they want to stack us on top of each other. This is generally 55 years and older. So, you know,
Say that
those
again, how
kinds of
much?
$7.2 billion goes to affordable multifamily rental housing. So that means somebody
Multifamily
else owns it. Yeah.
rental.
Yes.
Does that mean a housing project or something like that?
Pretty much, that's what it sounds like. And 55 and older. What are those called? Those retirement communities. And then we got 1.1 billion going to low to moderate income home ownership programs, and this includes. And this is the part that kind of turns me off right here. Is this includes nonprofits and other entities. So what they're also doing is adding wraparound services to be able to take money from this. So, rehabs and things like that, they could apply for this grant money that's supposed to be providing housing assistance and then, funnel that into an NGO. You got $500 million going to water, sewage, parks, transportation, and related infrastructure, which I thought we already paid taxes for that. Then you got 450 million going to farm worker housing loans and grants. And that was kind of interesting because I'm like, and
Oh,
nowhere in here does it say citizen. It's always resident for 1 year.
I
So
was just thinking,
that tells you,
Are these the Dolores Huerta, uh
yeah,
oh my god,
yeah, the United
the
Farm Workers.
union workers? The United Farm Workers,
Yeah,
which are
and
all
then
migrant workers.
175 million to the UCs and the Cal State each for 1,200 beds. 1,200 beds. And I started thinking about, like, I used to live in Irvine, and the Irvine company, they build these massive buildings. Like, those are the companies that should be building these things. I mean, 175 million. I think some of that will go to I don't know. I've heard through the grapevine because I do work at the community colleges that they want to do housing on the community colleges as well. But I didn't see anything in this grant. Yeah, they want dorms, and some colleges are buying up motels and hotels and giving vouchers, and there's all kinds of stuff. And then there's $200 million to tribal housing grants. I think that's a pretty broad brush. 200 million to local lower cost housing pilot programs. And those are those
Oh
programs you
god,
see
pilot
like in Los
programs,
Angeles.
NGOs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they end up, buying an old motel and getting $10 million, and then it's never finished. And then 1.25 billion going to veteran home loan assistance. So again, a lot of it's going to the NGO, private developers. A lot of this will be administrative costs. The way I kind of saw it was as an expansion of government, because in order to kind of administer all this money and organize it and give the grants to whoever, whatever, now you're talking, a whole staff. You're talking a whole office full of people who are going to skim right off the top, not in an illegal way, but like in a way that is going to dilute a substantial portion of this money. So again, what I see is a lot of pork here, man, and it just kind of scares me. And you know what it also does? It puts money into the market that we have to compete against. Because if we're
Yeah.
going out to go buy a new home, or our folks are getting a 55 plus, and they only have the money that they have, uh, their dollars are going to compete against these dollars, and I think that's even more of a problem with Proposition 37, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But it just seems
It
like
doesn't
a
take a lot of
big
money,
boondoggle.
Vincent. It doesn't take a lot of money to not qualify for low income housing.
Yeah,
Um, you know, this reminds me of something here, at least locally in Fresno. Um, I remember during COVID and a little bit before that, the city was helping, um, they were helping to go out and buy some of the old hotels on the old 99 highway. Um, there's just hotels that people just weren't uh, frequenting frequenting anymore. So They go in, they buy these old hotels, and they renovate them so that the homeless people can live in them. But they did this so many times that now I think back and start to ask myself, how many homeless people do we have in Fresno that the rooms there haven't already been filled up, or are they empty and these homeless people aren't using them? Because I know that they do have requirements, right? Like you can't be on if you're on drugs, you're frequenting, they kick you out, things like that. There are people that use drugs and just choose to not take advantage of that because they just want to live their life. They just want to be on drugs. It's one of the things that Bianca was talking about. These people don't, the majority of these people don't want help. They just want to be on drugs. So how I seen something somewhere, maybe it was one of Ramin's videos, um, where he was talking about the empty apartments that were out there, and the number of them were just sitting unused. And this is just a question that we don't ask, and we keep throwing more money to have more empty rooms or shelters for the homeless or lower income housing, and what we just continue to wait. I hate to call it a waste of money because I know that people need help, Vincent. People need help. I don't wanna be the one that sounds inhumane in saying we're not gonna help them, but how much help do they really need? Where are the real numbers here? I now
Well, I
now I
think
know. Go ahead.
this bill's interesting because I think it's kind of a little bit of a Trojan horse here because, yeah, it's cloaked as housing, financial taxpayer money going to help improve the housing situation here in California. But then when you really dig into the bill, what you come to realize is a lot of it is just the wraparound services, such as education,
Mm,
healthcare, all of those things. And that's where the NGOs can come in. That's where they can take their cut and really the housing is kind of just the centralized point to kind of gather people, right? Then you can
yeah.
give them psychological help, you can do the drug thing, you can do all the other things that go along with it. And I think that's why Proposition 1 kind of digs into education, because what you see is like really a broad brushstroke of covering all of these different groups. And that's why I called it the Porky Pig bill, because it's just bacon from the beginning to end.
Vincent, you brought something up that I am really uncomfortable with. You brought up the fact that community colleges want to put housing on campus. I can't believe that.
Oh, that's been an issue for a long time, and I know for a fact, like, because I taught at multiple colleges in multiple counties, and I always loved to go to the meetings and stuff, even when I was a part-time faculty member. I like to know what's going on, and I find it interesting, just generally. So this has been a push for a very long time. There is a homeless problem amongst community college students. They're trying to get back on their feet and all of that stuff, and I understand that, but it just seems as though a lot of these colleges and universities are becoming more social services hubs than educational hubs. Like a lot of times I think about it and I'm like, well, that money could have been used. We could have paid for everybody's textbooks, or we could have invested in, open educational resources that allow for zero cost textbooks, which all my classes have, or the development of really good things like the California Virtual Campus. That's a really good thing that's been developed, and it allows students to take courses in specialty courses throughout the state. Even if you live in Riverside and the specialty class is in Fresno, you can take that class because now there's an exchange. All of those things are good. But when they start digging into and becoming essentially hubs of social services, that's where it becomes kind of difficult to kind of say justify the money, so to speak.
Golly. You know what? I don't like it. To me, I understand the homeless aspect of it, but I think that when the state requires cities to build low income housing, um, already, um, I don't understand the need for dormitories at a community college. The community college is there to serve the community. Once when I start to think of dormitories being built at community colleges, to me, it's almost painting the picture of, let's start importing in students. And that I'm not saying foreign students, that's not what I'm implying. I'm just implying from outside of the community. You know, if I live in Sacramento, I don't want people from Fresno or San Francisco taking up space in my community college. I think that my local students that can't necessarily afford to go to Sacramento State, UC Davis, um, uh, the other colleges around there, or to just start to have a more economic start, they should be able to have that space at the community college. Now, I know that there are certain um, issues with that, but like you said, there's the opportunity to take those things online, which opens the door for uh, easier paths that way. But I don't want my community college being opened up for people outside. For the homeless people, though, I don't want to sound inhumane or like I don't like my fellow man. Everybody goes through tough times. There is Section A housing. There is assistance in cities to get uh, housing. So I just don't see the need for that. I think that we are throwing a lot of these freebies out there. I don't know that they're all being taken advantage of, but even if they are being taken advantage of, it's too much. We're making it too easy to have that life to live a life that is easy. We're making it too easy to have it easy.
Yeah,
And
I mean, there are some cases where I've had students who've been able to kind of right their ship of life, and those stories are great, and that's great. And I think we should help people like that in those sorts of ways. But you
absolutely.
know, private donations, here we go. Or where is all this NGO money that's out there? Why isn't that being used to help homeless people in local community college districts? And
Yeah,
and what ends up happening, I think, with a lot of these on-campus housing, a lot of this on-campus housing goes to athletes who are coming from out of state.
yeah,
And there, traditionally there has been a heavy push for international students as well. And the reason for that is they bring in heavy amounts of revenue because they pay, out of country foreign visa, uh, tuition and fees. And because of that, they are kind of trapped. So they have to stay
yeah.
at the college.
I don't,
So
yeah, yeah,
there's lots that it's just scaffold on it on over the course of multiple decades, and it's become a major issue. And you know people always want to blame the pensions, right? And yeah, I get that. There's a lot of that going on, the abuse of that, or people like in administrative positions. I'm not saying they're necessary, but I think it's much more important to fund the teachers in the classroom as opposed to
absolutely.
having hundreds of people at a district office somewhere. Hopefully that doesn't get me in trouble here. No, but they're all great people and whatnot, but it's just a lot of overhead. If you're looking at it
Yeah,
from a business perspective, and that's kind of the way I look at everything, is from an economic perspective, and that's what kind of historian I am, and that's how I look at politics. That's how I look at everything. Because I was a small business owner, and it was vital to my survival that I looked at the world in that way. And I think it's the guilt trip is there. And I was telling my students today, that old Catholic guilt. That's how they get you, and I feel like that's been weaponized to a certain extent.
it has been. It has been. And Vincent, Proposition 1, they got you. They got you by the guilt. Uh,
Yeah,
there's another one though. Proposition 37. Tell them about it. I'm sure this is the
this
good one, right? This is a good
This
one,
one's
right?
fine. This one's fine. And
Yeah?
this one I call the lobbyist proposition. And hey, good for them, because if we the people aren't gonna here's my pitch here. The lobbyists have taken over the state. They have taken over the
Right.
legislation in the state, and it's our fault because we don't vote, because we don't get out there and we don't fundraise and we don't give candidates money. We expect them to pay for it, and then we want them answerable to us. That's why the state is in the state that it's in. And Proposition 37 is exactly that. So here it's up to $25 billion. Basically, what's going to happen here is the state is going to fund loans for people to bring them up to 20%. So let's say you got 3%. Let's just call it $100,000 house, right? Just for the
Mhm.
sake of argument to keep the numbers nice and easy. So you have $100,000. If you want to buy a home, you get that 3% down, and the state will loan you the other 17%. So it gets you up to 20%. I didn't see anything in there, but I think that takes away the mortgage insurance if you're at the 20% threshold with the bank. And then when you sell the house, the government will take the money back. The good part about this bill, or the better part, I don't know if it's good. The better part about this bill is it is completely supposed to be self sufficient if it doesn't go off the rails. If it goes off the rails, we're going to end up paying for it, and the general fund will end up having to foot the bill for this, and that is $10 billion, which is roughly $500 to $600 million a year for 25 years. Uh, so anyway, Proposition 37 will essentially fund people's loans. It will also uh, allow or fund or give grants to private contractors to build new housing. And these homes have to qualify. And the crazy part about this bill is some of the qualifications can go up to $1.2 million, $1.5 million for a home, depending on where you live. But there's lots of really kind of nuanced things in here that talk about, you know, they want to increase the number of homes, but then they also want
Yeah.
to increase the number of buyers on the market, which it essentially turns into a net negative. And all I could think about while reading this was the solution to build faster housing and to make it cheaper is to get more supply. But now that you're adding more buyers, that supply is going to be just as limited, if not more competitive, which will raise the cost of the homes. So, like after reading this, my whole thing was, why don't we just, uh, you know, deregulate a little bit, make it easier to get building permits, make it easier. But see, here's
Yeah.
the deal,
Yeah,
Gio.
that's a good point.
The state doesn't get to act as an intermediary. It doesn't add that layer of bureaucracy. It doesn't create jobs within the state if you deregulate. And that's what this bill will do. It'll create a buffer between the bank and the buyer who's getting the loan from the state. And then at the end of the loan, the interest is going to fund the next round of people up to 55 years. Or if you buy the home and sell it, then part of the proceeds go back to the state and it refunds back into the general fund of this whole
I
boondoggle
do
thing. So
I
pretty
do have a
wild, actually.
I do have a question on it. Um, does it, does it block corporations from getting money on it?
No, no, and in fact, I think there will be like a group that you can apply to be like one of these preferred builders. So you can go in, get a preferred builder kind of deal here, then you build it, and then you sell it to people who are already qualified. uh, and it's and again, what it does is it also brings competition against normal people who have saved their money, who have gone kind of the hard route, or maybe got a little bit of an inheritance and are trying to parlay that into their first home. And now you're competing against people who can go and get the 17% as a down payment from the state, and who knows, if they default, then the state holds the bag on that. And I think that comes out of the general fund. But that's always the issue here is the taxpayer is going to be left holding the bag with
Yeah.
these revenue bonds.
And
Cal HFA, I think that's what it's called.
that's where the problem is going to be for me. So, for me, Proposition 1, personally, I'm voting no on it. I'm not a I just feel like it's like I have personally called it the housing project bill. The 37, to me, I'm gonna vote no on it just because it's sloppy. I don't like corporations being able to take advantage of a bill. If it's written for the people and it's gonna help people buy houses, I like that because, we have a couple generations like millennials. I was blessed enough to get into it early, but I know that there's a good part of my generation that can't go and purchase a house. It's hard to come up with 20% or 3% and qualify for certain programs. Now here they're offering the ability to do that, but it doesn't block out the corporations. It doesn't block out the people that I don't want being able to get a hold of that money. Um, so sloppy bill writing again in Sacramento.
Well,
And
one of the things I noticed too, Gio, I just want to kind of jump in here real quick.
Mhm.
I think it was Proposition 1, there was no rebuttal written. So they just wrote the bill and there's no rebuttal written. It's just their argument, the writers of the bill's argument. And I think that, that goes to one of the deeper issues is even some of the Republicans are getting money from these people, and good for them. because
Good for
again,
them.
well, here's the God honest truth. The fact of the matter is, if we don't step up as we the people, like they did in 1978 with Proposition 13, or how they fought against a lot of these measures in the 1920s and 30s, then we're going to get what we get. That's
You know what it
and
reminds me of, Vincent? Because a lot of people are gang. Like I loved watching Latino Free Minds because you guys do so much for the Republican Party. Like, I'm not here for the Republican Party. Okay.
yeah, and I don't
Um,
think they're here for you.
There I don't think they're here for me either. Like, I was at the convention. I don't think Corin Rankin said hi to me once. Okay.
Oh, she said hello.
Not
She was very lovely to me, by the way. She was extremely lovely to me, and we exchanged pleasantries, and she was very nice. So I'll give her credit where credit is due.
ha-
But then Sean Steele called me a Nazi, and I was like, "What? I'm just drinking a drink
well,
here."
half of the Latinos at the convention were offended. No, I'm kidding. There was actually a lot of Latinos there. Um,
A
but
lot.
but here's the thing for me is it's um if you continue to mess around and you don't represent the people, this happened before. This happened with Vincent. You are the historian on the show. There was a certain president, uh, Roosevelt, that went and started his own party because he had enough. Was it the Bull Moose
He
Party?
did. He did. It was the Bull Moose, and it was with a California governor named Hiram Johnson, who was his vice presidential nominee. One of the best politicians in California history is Hiram Johnson. He helped with the Imperial Valley Water Project. He helped end corruption after the San Francisco earthquake. He was a governor and then a U.S. senator for California. So yeah, and those are the people I call progressive Republicans and identify most with them because progressive has been termed kind of a bad word, right? Especially on the right. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're no, no, no. Progressive means you are willing to explore some of the ideas and kind of challenge the status quo to find new solutions. And Teddy Roosevelt did that, and he was a very progressive president. But he trust busted, not as good as Taft. But what I'm saying is they're willing to kind of go against the establishment. In fact, the part of the reason Teddy Roosevelt becomes president is because they didn't want him as governor of New York, so they promoted him slash demoted him and hoped to hide him behind William McKinley. And then McKinley got shot in Buffalo, This is one of the most comedic things ever. He gets shot, and there's an X-ray machine 50 yards away, and it's a brand new invention on display, and they can't find the bullet, and he dies. So
Oh,
they have to go
snap.
find Teddy Roosevelt in the wilderness somewhere. So it's like, the Republican Party has kind of gone through these cycles before. And here's another interesting fact: of all the 80 seats in the California State Assembly in the 1920s, only 3 were held by Democrats. So the
Oh
the the
my
tables
god.
have turned. The tables have turned before, and they can turn again. It's just, you have to have the right policy. You have to be able to communicate it properly and educate the public. And I just don't think any of those things are happening, and people are not inspired to donate money. And
No,
that's
they're
what
not.
makes politics go round. And we haven't solved that issue in the Republican Party. And you have, some great candidates and not so great candidates, but none of them have money, unless they're go look at their money. Go to Cal Access, look at their money, see where they're getting their money from, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So
Yeah, no, that's an important resource. Vincent, Latino Free Minds. This is our first episode of uh, Rebellion to Tyranny, or to Tyrants. Um, you had brought up an interesting fact to me about the Republican Party, specifically in California, when it comes to Latinos. And I don't want to steal thunder away from you. But we had an interesting start here in California as a Republican Party. And who started it? And I
yeah,
think
well,
Latinos in California, they ought to know, because when they call me things like coconut and they ask, how much is the Republican Party paying you? I'll give you a hint. It's zero. Um, I think that they should know about the start of the
well
Republican
the
Party here.
Pio Pico was involved. His nephew, Antonio Pico, was involved. In fact, he was one of the delegates who went to the national convention and put in a vote for Abraham Lincoln. So that gives you an idea of just how deep, the Hispanic community was tied in to the California GOP. And I think that's been forgotten. The first Hispanic governor was Romualdo Pacheco, and he wasn't elected, but he was the first governor of Hispanic descent, California native born. He was also an ambassador to Guatemala. He was also the first U.S. congressman of Hispanic descent with voting rights. I mean, we have all of these great people. Francisco Ramirez. Go look up. Um, he has a whole newspaper. You can use AI to translate all those newspapers. They're in the USC archive. Francisco Ramirez, he was a staunch Republican, and he says stuff in his writing that is really interesting, because he says, people always say, the Indians this, the Indians that, but like the Mexicans are more are less united than the Indians are, and they have their own tribes. He's like, I don't understand it. Like, why can't we get it together? And what happened in the 19th century is kind of the same thing that's happened now. We have been kind of cast aside. We have been kind of diluted from the process. And because of that, we don't necessarily have a voice. And the problem, I think, for the GOP or anybody, and I said this about Becerra, is the Hispanic community in California, whether you're a sixth generation or a first generation person, it doesn't matter. That's 40% of the population. And if you're not going to even look to see how you can uh, attract that demographic, then you are dead on arrival, as far as I'm concerned. And I haven't seen any outreach. And I think the Democrats on the other side kind of take the Latinos for granted. And so that's why I'm a Republican. I'm a Republican, first off, because I believe in decentralized government. I believe in smaller government. So just based on the terms, not party, I'm a Republican through and through. But with that being said, there's kind of this automatic default that you're, like you said, a coconut if you vote for, anything Republican, or if you're a Democrat, you're automatically a good guy. And the truth of the matter is, there, it's the world is not black and white. It's a bunch of shades of gray, and people need to start to look at the nuance of things because we're getting hosed, we're being
Yeah.
overcharged, we are being taxed, and when you look at taxes, specifically the history of taxes in the state of California, California only had property tax up until the 1930s. They had no state income tax. That happens in the 1930s. They have no sales tax. That happens in the 1930s. And so California was completely self sufficient until the 1930s. And then all of a sudden, they started accumulating all this money through sales taxes, which they describe, and I found this to be interesting. They described at that time as a poor person's tax, because a poor person has to go and buy food. The poor person has to go and get gas, or not back then, but yeah, or maybe so, but not to the same extent. But that's a poor person's tax. A wealthy person drives a Tesla. They plug it into their house and they have solar panels. Somebody renting in South Central, or the San Gabriel Valley, in some of the rougher neighborhoods, like they're commuting to
Yeah.
Los Angeles, 40, 50 miles. And that's all taxation. And then your income's being taxed. And it's like, and I told this to my nephews as well. I remember years ago, about 10 years ago, they were so excited. Like, the minimum wage is going to go to $15. And I said, congratulations, you're going to be eligible for state taxes, state income tax. You're going to be eligible for federal taxes. Congratulations. And so now that $15 is not worth the $7 it was when you and I were, working for 4, 5, $6 an hour, and we can go and, you know, go big time and get a double meal for $6. Now
We
it's
don't think
like,
things through. We just
no,
don't think them
no,
through.
it's very short sighted. And,
It's very short-sighted, and
I,
we never look at the history of it all. And that's why
yeah,
I'm so glad that we started this show on Monday nights, is that, you know, not only are we gonna talk about, things that are currently going on, but just to have you here to be able to tell us about the things of the past. Especially once, because sometimes we get these Hispanics that tune in, they're just like, "You guys are just bootlickers," and to just have somebody be able to tell them, like, "Actually, we used to
yeah,
run the show back then, dude.
for a
We
long
were in
time.
charge, and we gave it away."
Yeah.
This is
Yeah, and I always say this too. Like I said this, it always comes up. So, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I say, and I always, I'll say this to my students. I say, I'm a Democrat, but nobody hates a Republican more than me. I will go after a Republican because I know the way you're supposed to be acting. If you're talking about small government and you're using the Republican tag, and you're there voting for big giant bills, or you're voting for things that do not send the power back to the people, then you are not a true Republican. And so, you know, I have no problem with the Democrats, and people go, "Oh, no." Well, I don't have a problem with the Democrats because the Democrats are doing what Democrats are designed to do.
yeah,
And you can't be mad at them for being good at it, and sending good, skilled politicians to these particular races, and you're not even trying to appeal to new demographics, and that's a big problem. I think that's where the Democrats haven't figured out, and I think the Republicans need a rude awakening. And there's nobody better than people within your own party to do that, to call you out and to hold you accountable, because who else is? The Democrats don't need to hold you accountable because they have a supermajority. So who's going to hold the Republicans accountable? Who's going to let the continual bad mouthing go on? Who's going to let the slander of fellow Republicans continue to go on? Everyone
yeah.
always talks about like this the Reagan's 11th commandment, and then they'll completely give you a rant on Facebook about how you don't deserve to run for office. It's like, who the hell are you? And second,
Yeah,
come and debate me, bro. Yeah, come and debate me. And that's another problem. They act like they want to debate, but then nobody ever shows up to debate. Let's hash these issues out. And like I say, to my history students, we're not looking for the best answer. We are looking for a better answer. And if we can find a better answer, then that's what we want to do. And that's what the Republican Party needs to start doing. And we need new leadership to do that. I'm not convinced that the current leadership in there has we'll just say the assertiveness. I'll use that word. It'll be nice. But they don't have the assertiveness to just go and do things that need to be done. And maybe make a couple of tough decisions and maybe
Yeah.
recalibrate their message and maybe bring in some people that, hey, maybe they're a little bit controversial, but they're going to stir the pot and get a lot of attention. And how about we get them more attention so we can get them maybe peeling back that 20%, and we can start to climb up the ladder a little bit here in the next decade. Because just kind of doing the same thing over and over and thinking you're going to, win an office because somebody has quote unquote experience, like the Democrats proven that that's not true. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily need experience. Like they'll run anybody. And that's the thing too. That's another big thing that I've noticed is the Democrats will like let Democrat on Democrat happen all day long, and they let the cream rise to the top. That's something that doesn't happen in the Republican Party for whatever reason. And I think that could be beneficial. Let the horses race, and then the best horse goes to the next round. But we have to give them
Absolutely.
not only financial support, but we have to give them infrastructure. And that's something that's uh, desperately lacking in the California GOP and in the local central committees as well. There are people that don't know how to do stuff. Like you go and here's one big thing, Gio. Like you go to like I went to every single Democrat who was running for Congress in this area, and I went and I looked at their websites. Beautiful logos,
Oh,
beautiful
yeah.
professional headshots, beautiful. They had a debate immediately as soon as the Prop 50 new lines came out. They had a debate with like 11 or 12 of them running in a deep red sink in Ken Calvert and young Kim seat in California 40. Immediately had a debate so you could decide who you wanted, and it didn't work out for them, but still they went through the process and they allowed people to have their voice and allowed people to get a platform. And some of these people were quite young. They were in their
Yep.
30s and early 40s, and so yeah, perhaps they don't win this round, but the next round now you need somebody to run for assembly because somebody vacates a seat, and now you got three or four people who have a little bit of name recognition, who have a little bit of an identity, and they can just step into those seats and maybe take it from a Republican. So that's what's missing in our party, I think. And I won't even say our party because I'm not part of the party. The party doesn't want me to be around because I did my thing, and whatever, and I'll do it again too.
I hope you do. I hope you do, Vincent. No, seriously, because the reality is that the Republican Party does need fighters. It does need to turn around. It does need to help out. It does need to do more. Um, when you have a thing like Proposition 50 that comes around and nobody says anything because everybody's going to be up for election in the next year and they don't want to be boondoggled by a big loss from the year before. Oh, I don't want my name being tarnished with Proposition 50 because I have to run in 11 months. So, you know, too bad, so sad. We have a bunch of losers. So it's time that we turn it around and start to build up winners and build up a culture that is willing to try things to turn it around in California. Because doing the same thing over and over isn't doing anything. And I'll tell you what, Vincent, you didn't have much help. To this day, we haven't had many people reach out to us. Yeah, I went to the GOP convention and there was a lot of people that were like, "Hey, we love what you're doing." But aside from helping out, the only help is people reaching out to us because they want to be on the podcast. And we've ignored a lot of people. We have ignored a lot of people. It's not because we don't want to have you on, it's because we need to see something we need to see something, right? We need to see that you're out there doing something that's worth bringing you on. I've had candidates on, like Shane Lewis, who by chance I went to an event locally and met him, and I was like, this guy needs to win. Um, we knew David Serpa from the governor's election. Thank God, because when he ran for state treasurer, we already knew who he was, and we knew that he was a fighter. There's people like I have gone to places where people will ask, "Who are you voting for governor? Who do you think is going to be the big candidate?" And I would sit there and I'd be like, you know what? There's two people. There's two people. The first one I will tell you straight up that I think has the best chance to win is Chad Bianco. But there's somebody that a lot of people probably don't know. But if everybody was to hear him, they would probably all vote for him. It's David Serpa. And you know, he is a killer. He's awesome. He had his wings clipped there at the end. He didn't have the blessing from Carl DeMaio.
Yep.
That's a huge thing. And then the other thing was uh, the um, unfortunately the information that came out from the LA GOP. I won't say names. That called him a certain racial term that I had also been labeled around the same time. That person had recently even posted a video where Serpa's there, another candidate, very important candidate, and I'm in the background too. And I'm like, "Hey,
Yeah.
you're calling us this word. None of us are that. Maybe
I
one
think I
person
was
in the
getting a
photo."
ginger ale. I was there too.
Yeah, you should
I
have
was
been
getting
there, Vinny.
yeah, I
Actually, there
was
was there
there.
was there was actually a picture where you were in there, and they
Yeah,
called
well,
they
but here's the thing. Like we know these people, like
none
the
of us
people
are
in this.
those, except for one. There's one that might be, but the rest of us are definitely not. And that one person I said that might be, I think he just gets mixed up in it because it's kind of a social media type thing. And
Well, I
and if it
think
wasn't for that,
a lot of these commentators, it's like, what are you doing? How are you helping? That's my feeling on it. Like, if you're not helping and if you're not open to debate, then what are you doing? You're showing
yeah,
your God givens out there on camera, which is great. Go ahead, have fun. But how are you helping the cause? And then, everybody wants to complain about all these bills and all this that's passing through the legislator. But then when there's candidates out there, you don't help them. You
yeah.
need to help them. And that's not just like going on social media and getting clicks and likes. I hate that. That's part of the reason why I was reluctant to even kind of do this stuff. um because I felt like it's kind of gross. But I do really
It is.
enjoy like talking about it, the current events and things like that. And I think there's a real opportunity here if we can educate the public and just do it in a nice way. That's another thing that really upsets me is people being like just gross about it. Just be nice. Hey man, and whoever has the better ideas, let's let the better ideas rise to the top. But you don't get anywhere by not make trying to make friends with people. Like I'm willing to collaborate with anybody. I'll collaborate with people who probably don't like me. I'm open, and people get scared by that, which I don't understand. It's just very unfortunate. And who crowned this person queen or this person king? Like, yeah,
Well, I like collaboration. I'm Vincent. I guess you and I really haven't discussed it. But in the past, on prime time, I was always willing. Doors always open for a Democrat to show up. I know on the Jefferson, you've had a Democrat, and I'm not afraid of them coming on because I don't think that we're too far apart. We're all American, and I know that there's a lot of things that we'll probably agree on, and it's those differences that we should be debating, and we should be trying to prove to people why our side is better. And if we can't prove that, then
we
I
deserve
guess
to lose.
we deserve to lose, or um, you know, put labels on people and smear people along the way, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the
Well,
producers right there. One of the
that person
producers
in
right there.
particular, let's see, any, that person in particular went after me after my election, and I was just, I was like, for what? I already lost. Like, what does it matter now?
Kick you while
How
you're
is this
down.
helping?
Kick you while you're
Yeah,
down.
go ahead.
Yeah.
But that's what actually inspired me to stay involved. Because at that point
Yeah,
I was like, well,
exactly.
I could just go have fun, I could just go and coach football and coach baseball and be a community member and be loved. I'm loved
Yeah,
in my community. Everywhere I go, I get kids come in and say, "Coach, hey, how's it going?" High fives, and it's great. It's awesome. And
yeah,
so I'm trading that to like have somebody talk trash to me who lives 50 miles away, doesn't even live in my community, yet they're a delegate in my community. How does that even make sense? Like, so I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but that's the fact of the matter. And if you're not willing to work with me, like, why should I have any quarter when it comes to you? Like
yeah.
people are like, you can't run again. It's like, maybe I will, because if I'm going to get spit on anyways, I might as well have fun with it.
There's an important thing, Vincent, when I joined Latino Free Minds, there was an important thing that everybody told us is uh, told me at least, is we're not here to gatekeep. We're here to help bring people up. If somebody wants to collaborate, we'll collaborate. I mean, as long as it's nothing crazy. Um, there are some times where people will want to collaborate with, the AI stuff. I'm not about the AI. I like original content. It's important for
Yeah.
me. I'm willing to collaborate with you. Not with ChatGPT, not with Grok. I want to collaborate with you. And this particular person, we've actually collaborated with them. At that point, we were anti-Semitic. We were not. When it was convenient for them, but when it became
Allegedly.
inconvenient for them, we became that label for them. And it's like one of the producers said, we have two Jewish people on Latino Free Minds. One of them you probably would never realize was that. Um, but
Well,
it's
here's one thing too, Gio. Like,
yeah.
they tried to label me anti-Semitic, and I'm like, okay, so one of my best friends is Jewish, and I worked at the Simon Wiesenthal Center for 3 years, and they all loved me there. So you can go and write a letter, and maybe they'll condemn you before they condemn me. So
Yeah.
it's just crazy. It's like people just talking out of nowhere, and because why is because there's no leadership to corral them in. A good leader would have said, "Hey, we don't need this. We don't need this
Oh
kind
yeah.
of
Absolutely.
publicity."
If I was a leader, and if I was a leader, I would have got on the phone with especially if you have 100,000 followers on X, 100,000
Sure.
followers on Instagram. You're not a celebrity, but that's a good sized following. If I would have got on the phone and said, "Hey, this is weird. Uh, you posted this thing about these new up and coming guys. Now, they're not big. They're not big. They only have a few thousand people that follow them, but there's a lot of people that watch them. Sometimes their videos go viral. In fact, there are candidates that will collaborate with them. We think it's a bad idea that you do this. Um, w- you know, maybe we can have a call. Maybe we can set something up and just hash this out because this isn't productive. We want to grow, but we're the dividers, Vincent. Here's Vincent Romo again, dividing the Republican Party. Um,
Always splitting everything up.
come on, Vinny. But yeah,
Well,
no, no.
yeah, yeah. No, and that's unfortunate, and I think things will change in the future, especially if we just, if I think cooler heads will prevail, and hopefully those people get on board, and if they don't, then you know they don't. Um,
It
but
starts with good leadership.
I Yeah, and I don't like anybody who runs for office, especially after running for office. I have this greater appreciation of just saying, they gave it their shot. We don't need to run them through the mud. There a lot of people went after Chad Bianco. It's like, he took his time as parts of his life that he'll never get back traveling through this. I'm sure it was a thrill.
An entire year going
Oh,
up and down the
yeah.
state,
Stressful for
missing
your
birthdays,
family.
missing
Hmm.
important events, for you because he thought he wanted to do this for you. And when it doesn't work out and he's down and out, you wanna kick him and you wanna say, "Hey, are you gonna endorse Steve?" And he's just sitting there like, "Dude," like, and he's probably I don't know what he's thinking, but in his head, he's probably thinking like, man, that guy just, like, he really went after me, opened up websites and slandered me.
Well, I got
I
the
just
same kind of treatment. I got the same kind of treatment before Chad did, and I had, when I saw what happened to him, and people asked me for my endorsement or whatever, and I said, I don't mean anything at this point in time. This would just be an insult to me, because people were just slandering me left and right, and I was like, why would you want my endorsement? It's a capitulation, is what it is, and good for him for not capitulating. And I wouldn't expect if I said those types of things to people, and you know, I wouldn't expect them to endorse me either. And why would you want an endorsement of this terrible candidate that took a knee and all of this stuff? Why would anybody want his endorsement if that's
good
the way you
good point.
actually feel? So because I heard everything as well, like, oh, you're a terrible candidate, you're unqualified, and blah blah blah. And it's like, then why do you want my endorsement?
Yeah.
What do I mean? I mean nothing then. So that's fine. And I'm okay with that because I have a wonderful life. And I went for it. And that's what people do in their lives. Chad did that, I did that, and I appreciate people doing that. Even Steve Hilton. And I've told him as much, and you could ask him, and I've told him as much, and I enjoy how he gives people undevoted attention. I absolutely love that. But doesn't mean I have to agree with everything he says, or Gloria Romero. And I've followed Gloria Romero's career from the beginning for 20 years. So she was my
Mhm.
representative. So I know her well, even probably more than she knows, because I have family members who were in politics for 20 years in that district, and still are, by the way. Um, but
Hey,
it's okay. I don't have to agree.
speaking of candidates, there's a candidate that I would like to invite on next week, Monday night, um, 7 or 7:30, Mr. Shane Lewis. Um, if you're watching, or, or not, maybe we'll clip this up and send this out to you. I'd like to invite you on the podcast next week. I would love to have you on. I think it's important that we start um, reintroducing important candidates up and down the state to voters, and I want you to be the very first one. Um, and
Oh,
then,
there's a comment. There it is from Shane Lewis himself. Shane Lewis for Congress. What's up,
hey,
LFM?
I guess we're a little bit important here.
There you
So
go.
I want to have Shane on. He's going to be our first guest. Um, I want him to be my first guest. If it can't be next week, it can be the following week, but it's got to be Monday. Um, and I every other candidate is on hold until I have Shane Lewis. Um, and then following the interview, Um, I might take a little bit of a break, and then we will start back up live, Vincent and I, at 9 p.m. when the kids are
Yeah.
asleep, and we
I
can.
may I may or may not be here next week because I'm being summoned, by my wife and her business partner to go to a client dinner. So I
Well,
may or
I'll
may not.
you let me know. If you're not, then following
I
the
think that's a good shot. I would love to hear from Shane Lewis. I've heard all about you, Shane, from Gio, and they speak very highly of you. I've gone through your website and everything, and these are the kind of guys that we need to get the word out on. Like
yeah.
Lorenzo Rios, who came on the Jefferson Club. Like I put the invitation out to everybody. I put it out to Mike Gates. I put it out to Hilton. I put it out. Me and Serpa put it out to anybody and everybody. Herb Morgan, another great one. Like I think the more exposure, the better. And it doesn't have to be like the most giant podcast of all time. My philosophy is like, you get three eyes at a time. Three eyes. Let's make it an even number. And
I get three pairs of eyes. Yes.
three pairs of eyes. Um, eh, and that's how we get things moving, and we share and move things around, and all that's what needs to happen. It needs to be stop. It needs to stop being such an exclusive club where it's like, oh, dude, what school did you go to? It's like, yeah, we can invite the construction workers, We can invite the professors. We can invite everybody. Let's invite everybody and let's debate it and let's see whose ideas are actually better. That's what I would like to see. And that's, my whole thing is being a lifelong learner. So having a
Yeah.
guy on like Lorenzo Rios was a real joy, a real experience. And same with Herb Morgan and Merritt Farron and David Kohlenberg, just understanding this. I feel like I've come to understand the state much better by just kind of asking simple questions.
Can I admit something to you, Vincent? Um, we've interviewed candidates on Latino Free Minds, but I started interviewing candidates on my own, and my interview style, I copied you. It was your interviews that made me go, "Hey, people don't wanna hear all this nonsense. That I don't wanna hear from Latino Free Minds the exact same thing that I heard on True Hustle podcast or, ABC podcast, Joe Rogan. I want somebody that is a normal person like me to have a real conversation with them, ask them questions that, um, are important to them because, they're different. It's a complete different perspective that, I think a lot of people resonate with, and I stole that from you, Vincent. I have to admit that
Well,
now that we're
it's not my
co-hosting a show
style.
together.
It's not my style. It's really, you know, being in the classroom for so long, like you get hundreds of students a semester. I just opened up today with a new semester, and I probably have like 200, 300 students that I'll get to know, and that what an absolute joy. And it's just asking questions and then cutting myself out. Like if you go to the Jefferson Club stuff, most of the time my mug is not even on there unless I'm making a comment. But most of the time it's just the other people, and that's what it was intended to be. Like let them speak, good or bad. Let them give us the pitch.
Yeah,
Like
you
why
know
do we
what?
have to?
But you know what I appreciate from your style that, um, I started to get, uh, responses from or follow-ups from candidates that would, uh, tell me later, like, "Hey, I really liked the interview because, you weren't necessarily asking, what the top things that are important to voters. You were asking more about who I was." And it's like you did all this research into me. I had Margaret Mims on, who was a sheriff here in Fresno County, and she ran for a local office here. And after the interview, she's just like, I, you know, I didn't even know that information was out there about me. And I was just like, I loved the fact that she appreciated that somebody gave her an opportunity to get to know her, not necessarily answer the same questions, because that both the candidates are gonna get the same freaking answers, you know? Just,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that where, I watch these interviews and it's like, make streets safer, let's reduce homelessness, let's be fiscally responsible. Gas is too expensive. Like, it's like, so
Yeah.
what's your solution? So what's your solution? And that's why I think, when I ran for assembly, I think I kind of shook a lot of people because, I'd just go into these rooms and I'd be like, Article 2, Section 8 of the California Constitution, let's put the California state income tax on the ballot and let's get rid of it and let them deal with it. Like we have to deal with it. And everybody cheered.
Yeah,
Like let's think of ways to do things. And yeah, maybe we'll fail, but we're already failing.
yeah,
So, let's be a little radical. People thought Howard Jarvis was out of his mind when he put the Prop 13 on the ballot, and it's been one of the most important, but also it's been helpful and hurtful in some ways as well. Some unintended consequences. But somebody has to put the spending in check. Somebody has to put everything back into the power of the people, and that is not happening right now. So that's what I hope to do by being involved here. I'm not here to really just help politicians or anything like that. I'm not intending to be a politician, but if I can help kind of usher in this new way of thinking, where the power goes back to the people, that'd be freaking awesome. So that's all I hope to do. And I
Yeah,
think you're on the
I
same.
I agree. I agree, and not just that, I mean, I wanna inform people. That's really, that's why I do this, 'cause I just wanna inform people. That's why I do my clips. It's not because of the likes, I don't really care. Somebody had messaged me the other day, they were like, "Man," one of the other Latino Free Minds members, he goes, "I love that I'm new here and everything, but, um, my videos just don't get as many likes as you guys." I'm like, "That doesn't matter, dude, like, I don't look at the likes, I don't look at the shares. I did the video and that's it. If later on I'm out at some event and somebody brings that video up, that's my satisfaction. It's not the online, the algorithm um and the analytics. I don't care about any of that. That doesn't matter to me. Like the amount of followers, and it just it doesn't that doesn't count in my head. It's
Well, it's
it's it's when
obviously not real life. It's just not real life because you look at, if that were the case, then Spencer Pratt should have won hands down. He got the most views of probably all time. So what do we do? you know
that's
like if
exactly.
that's real life, so we got to figure out how to make this stuff kind of real life, and that's the way we do that is we network with each other, we exchange ideas, and these ideas spread, and they go into the agenda of candidates. So hopefully that's what works.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So, next week, Vincent may or may not be here. I will be here. It'll be a little bit earlier for me, but I will. It looks like Shane Lewis has agreed to come on, so I'm excited for that. And I will run it on my own. I've done it before, and I'm not afraid to do it again. We'll continue going through the propositions. I might bring another one to you guys next week. And Vincent, if family comes first, if my wife tells me I got to be somewhere, I'm gonna be somewhere. Um, I will see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we canceled football practice too for it, so it's not a little one.
Oh snap!
so it's that. So, but thank
It's
you,
it's
for having me. Thank you and Daniel and all the guys at Latino Free Minds for embracing me and bringing me in, because I was a little reluctant to be involved in anything. I like to stay. To be completely honest, I liked being private. I liked being a private citizen. I liked not being bothered. I liked, seeing students at the local lunch spots in Cyprus, and saying hello and going to lunch and dinners and all that stuff. And this is a completely different world where people are scrutinizing not just your ideas, but they're putting their own spin on it too. And that's why I was a little reluctant to even get involved. But it's important. It's not necessarily even important for guys like you or me who have kind of quote unquote made it, but it's important for our kids. It's going to be very important. And I want my kids to look back and say, "Dad, what did you do about that?"
yeah,
And they see it.
exactly.
They see me going to the convention. And I'll say this publicly. Chad made a video. My kids are huge Chad Bianco fans because we live out here in Riverside. And Chad made a video, and that was awesome. So they know I'm involved. And then they're watching the commercials now and more intently. And oh, that was Chad Bianco, Dad. Did you see it? And it was cool. It was an interesting, very informative, and it opened up the dialogue in our household to where I can talk to my kids about, like, hey, he's running for governor, and then this is a lieutenant governor, and
Yeah,
then David Serpa, who just came over, is running for treasurer, and me and David are going to go. He's going to go do a speech. So it gets them like in the process of things, and I think that's good, and I think that's important, and I think that's what we should be doing, not
absolutely.
necessarily carving out their ideas for them, but just exposing them, and then letting them kind of figure out what they want to do, because their generation inevitably will inherit what we have here, and if we don't do anything, the inheritance is going to be
It
nothing.
is im
They'll
it is
inherit nothing.
important. It is important, just like you said, and the exposure that our kids get from it is great. I mean, my younger son, he's a Steve Hilton fan. Um, uh, I was obviously one of the biggest Bianco supporters. Um, and yeah, my daughter, she'll ask like, "Dad, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I do this." And she's like, "Oh, but why do you talk to all these governors and senators?" And I'm just like, "Uh, because I wanna talk to them and, they're willing to talk to me." And she's like, "That's it? You just wanna talk? You just because you wanna talk, they wanna talk to you back?" And then I'm like, "I guess so. I mean, I'm just your dad." Like, I'm not more special than just being your dad. And, and they love that. Um, Somebody put in the comments, "Vote for Venna." That's Adam Venna who exposed the unions for, making phone calls and outreach for Javier Becerra and Mayor Pass is gonna be at the Capitol. I might go to the Capitol this Wednesday, um, for the Nick Shirley event. Um, Aside from that, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I see there's a lot of viewers right now, and Monday nights we'll be back here, whether we're together or one of us at a. We will have a Latino Free Minds Monday nights. Uh, Rebellion to the tyranny. Hey, this is
Rebellion to
awesome.
Tyrants.
The rebellion to tyrants,
we
and we got a lot of cool stuff coming.
yeah, we
Vinny's
got
been
some
working on
fun
some
stuff.
sweet stuff. I've been working on some
Oh
sweet
yeah,
stuff, and, the production quality will be, going up from here. So,
we'll
thank you
try.
all for tuning in. Rebelling to Tyrants. Tune
Is
back in next
obedience
week.
to God.
It is obedience to God. Dude, I love the phrase.
It's a great phrase. It's ours.
It is ours. Uh, Let me hit end here.